Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Guys, listen, as you know, we do a lot of diversity on this show. We talk about everything from weddings to education to injustice, just a whole nine. So, guys, listen, tonight you're in for a great treat. We have none other than Dr. DeBora LT Mapp. Now, guys, Dr. Mapp is going to be talking with you about a program, SAUCE, SAUCE, SAUCE.
Right.
And there are so many other things that she'll be sharing with you about civil rights activism. From what I understand, her grandfather has written a book, and he's an innovator in the farming industry and that kind of thing. So, guys, you're going to have a great treat. But listen, let me tell you a little bit about this wonderful doctor. Now, Dr. Mapp is Schooling Solutions LLC as a retired educator. She's a critical thinking consultant and author known for a holistic approach to education and life that achieve results. As a descendant of the enslaved, granddaughter of farmers, and child of civil rights activist parents, Dr. Mapp understands that living, learning, schooling, and our families are linked and impacted by historical, political, educational, and social forces that require a holistic approach. She successfully facilitated change opinions and improved performances throughout her career as an agency career counselor, P12 teacher leader, and district curriculum coordinator and university administrator and professor. She parented one daughter and four sons to engineering degrees and is the proud grandmama of seven smart, beautiful, and thriving grandchildren. What about that, guys? Now, also, tonight, before we finish up this whole process, she will be sharing with you about some products that you can purchase, products that you need to help not only the children, but also help the parents. So, guys, listen, we want you to sit back and relax because we have a lot to share with you tonight. So, without further ado, the Nobody Asked Me Guys show and your host, Melvin Casey Lars, will talk with Dr. Mapp. Dr. Mapp, good evening.
Good evening,
Well, listen, it's
and
such a
thank you
great
for having me
pleasure.
here.
Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours, Dr. Mapp. As I told you when I was reading some information, and I said, "Wow, who is this Dr. Mapp? This is a very extraordinary young lady." So we have to talk with her. So if you don't mind, will you share with us a little bit more? I mean, I gave our guest just a smidgen of who you are and what you do, and if you can, if you can get, you were telling me a very interesting story about it having to hide underneath a desk to keep from being lynched at some point. So if you can tell us just a little bit about Dr. Mapp prior to us going into our now educational realm.
All righty. Okay. I'm usually considered to be an eccentric kind of a person, but my eccentricity is more, I see the world through a lens of hope and change. Those two things, not just hope, but change, and knowing that I have a responsibility. When I was young, I had an epiphany when I was at the farm one day. And the epiphany, I was laying on the sidewalk and I had just finished my eggs and biscuits, and I tasted egg, and it really struck me. This is deep. It's not just a taste on top, but I could really taste what that egg really felt like. And that really caused me to go on a journey of discovery, because I realized that life is more than just what you see on the surface. There are things that are going on that come to you that are God-given, that open you up to knowing what to do to make a situation better. And so this has been my whole life. I've been working from that point of view. And I went to all Black, good schools, segregated schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And, at one point we were going to school for half a day because the schools were so overcrowded and we couldn't go to school with the white children. And so, it's really strange. I'm going to tell a little story right now, but before that, for 1 year, we were in the 4th grade. We were taught by a white teacher on television. We were taught French. And I know it was probably a study. I've looked for it to see what, if there's something out there, but there's nothing out there. But I'm not sure if my name came up then and that's who they knew who I was or what. But, at some point during that school year, a lynch mob, a group of white men came into the school. They stormed into the school, and the principal and everybody had heard about it. So they said, protect her. Oh, excuse me. And so they put me under Miss Higginbotham's desk. She was sitting there and they just walked right by. She was a very big woman, very stately. And they just walked right by her. And that's where I was hiding. And I asked my daddy about that before he passed away a few years ago to make sure that I was thinking and I'm just imagining, because my siblings think I imagine a whole lot because I have a colorful imagination. But he said, sure. He said, that really happened. They came after you and we had to protect you. And they put me on a later bus to send me home so that they wouldn't know where I was. So that had to do with courage right there, because it didn't bother me. I said, my parents did an excellent job of raising all 8 of us. There are 8 of us. And in doing that, we had to fend for ourselves in some ways. We became independent, but we learned a lot of skills that we took into our children, raising our children. And I did that with my children. My grandmother had the largest group of children in her family with her 17 children. My mama had the largest, and she was a second child. My grandma was a second child. And my mama had the largest in her generation. And then I had the largest family in my generation, and I'm the second child also. So there's a lineage there that we follow, that I follow. And, life has been so good to me with 5 children. And, I met my husband, as a lot of us did in those days, when I was a freshman. Really, when I was in high school, I met him. I went up to visit my sister and met him. But he's a person who opened my world, because I had been restricted. My mama and daddy only cooked certain things on certain days. And so we were very regimented to a degree, but it was because we had very little money. One year, daddy made $2,000. And so from there, I realized that the world, this guy right here, he was my friend. And he really helped me to open myself up even farther, trying different foods and everything. And so eventually 2 years later, we got married and had 5 children. And it was really a very interesting time, because we had people coming. We were at the University of Kentucky, and there were people there who were from everywhere. Chester Grundy is a person who was over entertainment and over bringing people into the university. We had Dick Gregory. We had all kinds of big name people. My children ran with Dick Gregory. And so we had a lot of opportunities then. And my children, 5 of them, we had to decide where to put them in school. And so we decided, I did not want them to go to private school because I was a public school teacher. But when I saw the school, a Montessori school, I realized our children have to be there. And of course, they're the only Black children who were there for that first year. But it was an opportunity for them to grow and develop, and they stayed there until they went to middle school. All 5 of them did, over the years. And, it was a very good beginning. But see, we were vegetarian, so we were different that way. We had a library, and a lot of people said we didn't know any Black people who had a library, but we had 4 walls filled with books. And our children just had learning. We were just into that. And it was an alternative lifestyle to a degree, but it was also very structured in that family was very important to all of us. And learning was very important to all of us. And I'm from a family, I have more than 100 first cousins and their children. So large family. And it's, and we have people, when they divorce, they like to stay with our family. And I've been divorced for 23 years, and my ex still comes to family gatherings, and because of the way we run things. But when it comes to education, I went to the home of the rebels when I was in the 11th grade. Daddy had worked on school desegregation, and so it was time to change things. And for 2 years, I had no students to speak to me. The only people who spoke to me were the teachers. And, I was the only one in the honors classes. There were 4 of us who went to this school. And I was the only one in the honors class. And so at lunch, I saw, my friends who were Black, and I saw them, going home. But during the school day, no students would talk to me. They would act as though I wasn't even there. And my teachers, as I said, talked to me. And so from that experience, I realized how alone it can feel. But it didn't bother me too much because of the background and what I was into. That first year, I had homework, and I remember so vividly. I got the thickest book I could from the library, this thick. It was Valjean, what is what is his name? It was Les Miserables. 1,000 pages. I read it in 1 week because I wanted to inundate myself with somebody else's life. I live vicariously through others. And so I live vicariously through them while I'd be sitting in my daddy's chair doing homework on the one hand, but then looking at that book on the other hand. And so it's been the way I run my life. It's very convoluted, and I use a lot of research. I use a lot of books and things. And when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I realized I needed to change myself because I grew up in an all Black world, but the world was changing. So I had to go through a conscious metamorphosis. I had to really look at, why is it that you don't like white people? I was honest with myself because I'm from the South. And I looked at myself in reference to children, in reference to the fact that I'll be working in a desegregated setting. I'd be working with white students, white parents, some of them who wouldn't like me and accept me, but I had to work through myself so that I can understand it was okay. It was okay. And I was going to do the best that I could for those students. And I vowed to become a change agent, to not just accept things the way they were in schools, because it wasn't good enough for all of our students, but to make a change, to make a difference in what was going on. And so I did that starting with my first year. And, I was a teacher and I loved it in middle school. And it was real good for me, real good for students too. They hated social studies, but because of what I was doing, they learned to love social studies.
Well, that's wonderful.
And
Dr. Mapp, you're right where we need to be. Right where we
okay,
need to be. I as I'm looking at the information I have from you in the documentation, all the things that you're saying are all wrapped up right here. And I know that your primary focus centers around parents and families in your publications and the things that you write. And you're telling us now the love that you have for family, the love you have for children and difficulties. Now, I know, and this is a two-part question. I know that we're going to talk about sauce, and you're going to talk to us
yes.
about that system and that kind of thing. But now, I would like to ask, prior to you talking about sauce, piggybacking on what you're saying about family and your encounters. Did you encounter on a regular basis, or was it sporadic, parents that did not look like you, that were reluctant to accept the fact that you could instruct their children?
Yeah, I had a few parents like that, but once they met me and they saw, see, when I taught, I didn't just teach social studies, I taught life skills. And because I was helping children to become better people, parents were for me. They were supportive of what I was doing because they knew that I was doing what their children needed so they could be successful in the world. And I did it out of love. And when you do it out of love and caring, and also it was my mission. I had worked with a team, with a social studies. I worked with a language arts teacher, and we had a mission, and our mission was God driven, to do the best that we could for our children, because we were in a low income school, predominantly African American at that time. And we wanted to give them what was needed so that they could excel in life, not just school, but in life. And so we started Ujima Society, and we had some Afrocentric people to come in to have classes with our students. The males were separated from the females. So we were doing some things long ago that was very different. And that's part of the soft thing that comes in too, because when I look at speaking, I talk a lot. I'm a talker. My daddy's a talker from a long line of talkers. But at the same time, I'm an actor. I don't just talk about it, I do it. And in 2000, I went to a conference in San Francisco. And the conference was Writing to Change the World. An editor talked to me, and my thing then was just speaking the unspoken. And he said, that sounds really interesting. I need you to meet John Robbins. And John Robbins was of the fame of ice cream, the ice cream family. And so he said, you know, once you start writing, I really like what you're talking about, speaking and the unspoken. He said, but I'm giving you my business card. And so I want you to contact me once you finish your books, so your book, so that, you know, we can see how we can work with you if at all possible. And from there, of course, 13 years have gone by and I lost the card. But in doing that, though, that gave me impetus to know that I'm on the right track. And then I met a young man in a conference in New Jersey who told me, if you know so much, why aren't you letting other people know what you know? Why aren't you sharing what you know? And that was very important to me because he's right. I'm a teacher and teachers share information. And so I went from there, went home. I did something for church. I had a 4-page back to school newsletter that I had written for our students at our church. And my sister looked at it and she said, you need to write a book from this. And so from there, I wrote a 40-page book. It was full color and I wrote that. But then I presented that at a board meeting. I mean, I presented it at another conference, a Black family conference, and some friends of mine were there, Chess and Ann Grundy. And Ann said, Ann said, why is it that you need to add what you and Jim, your husband, have gone through? You know, you all have had a rich history. You need to add some of that. And see, plus we studied for 10 years under Grace and James Boggs out of Detroit. And so, that was part of my existence. I was doing that counterculture kind of a thing because there were some deep thinkers. And I started understanding dialectics, change, and the fact that you have to do something with that and that things are gonna keep progressing, but you have to keep continuing to change and not just stay where you are. And so from there, I, started realizing that, then I wrote a book. The first book was You Are Your Child's Best Teacher. And I had a personal look at it. And she told me, some people will get upset because you're saying you are your child's best teacher. So you need to not make it personal. And I took her word for it. But then again, I had a review from that book from Dr. James P. Comer from Yale. He said, and I use it in all my books because he was impressed with my book. And he said that she's telling us what we need to do to move our children to where they need to go, from childhood, from birth, all the way to graduating high school. And that book became Our Children and Future, Lessons in Family and School Engagement. And so that's a thick book, 174 pages. And when some people read that, they said, you have 2 books in here. You are, because I'm a different kind of thinker, I don't think just on the surface, I think holistically. Life comes together like that. And it's hard to separate school from life unless you want to do it and not have results with children. And so from there, I wrote 2 other books. And these books were parts, they were excerpted from this book. The first one was Prepare Our Children for Their World, from birth through graduation. The second one was Making Sense of Today, How to Connect for a Better Tomorrow. And I wrote both of these books in 2020 because I felt when we were going through so much with the turmoil, with the pandemics, with an S, there was a viral pandemic, but there was also a racial injustice pandemic. There was also, you know, when you're looking at the climate, when you're looking at climate change, that's a pandemic. It's all over the world. Racial injustice is all over the world. And so we're looking at not just one pandemic, we're looking at multiple pandemics. And so, you know, I did these books. And so one of my books, Prepare Our Children, is just facts. And it's just about 70 pages long. But then the other one is the same title, but the edition is the pandemics edition. And I put extra information in there because parents need to understand what we're going through. You know, the researchers are saying that when you look at where we are right now, a lot of us are grieving and we don't recognize it as grieving, you know, because it's happened so many times. So many people have passed and who were killed that really harmed us as humans. And, you know, our children sometimes are acting out on that now. And another book that I did with this same title, Prepare Our Children for Their World, is a guided journal, because some people may want to look at all this information in here and do a journal, do some writing. And I did that because there are so many parents now, or so many families who are taking care of their children who were not born to them. So they have a learning curve. And also there are foster children who need extra support because they age out of the system. So they need extra support when they're young adults. And, you know, my whole thing is really, we need to do a better job for adults so that we can do our work so that we can better prepare children for their future. And that's a major problem in our country. Another thing that we don't think about in our country is the fact that families are the smallest institution. They are the smallest social institution. And as a social institution, they help support the country. But we don't think about it. We think about families being, that's your problem. You know, those are your children. But see, it's my child, but it's our future, because all of this comes together. And so when you're looking at making sense of today, you're looking at a book that really, it makes some people angry because it exposes you to look at your own story. Start out with your story. You know, what happened in your past? Have you come to grips with that? And do you see whether or not you're following the same things that they did? Are you changing? Are you becoming a better human being? Because a part of this is humanity and the fact that we have to do better for humanity. Along with that, because the times have changed, you know, one thing that we used to have done for us years ago in the South, it could have been everywhere, we had insurance people. They would come by once a year and they would collect monies for insurance. And our insurance man, every year he would bring a multiplication table and he'd give it to us. And that's where we learned the times tables. And so what I did, I created a multiplication table, but on the other side of it, it has all the math facts. Because when you're looking for math facts, you have to look at a lot of places. They're not in just one place. And so because my children, going back to my children, all 5 of them have engineering degrees. And as they're analytical thinkers, I'm an analytical thinker, even though I'm into social studies, even though I have a counseling, you know, guidance and counseling background. But when it comes to my education, I became I got my doctorate, and it took me 13 years to get a doctorate. But in those 13 years, my 5 children were able to go to college and graduate, and they became engineers. My daughter was the first African-American woman engineer at Stanford who had a PhD. She also was the belle of her class. She went to Georgia Tech. At Georgia Tech, she became Miss Georgia Tech. She graduated with highest honors. And from there, she went to Stanford. So, groundbreakers, I'm so proud of her. She went to college the same year that I did, or the same year that I started focusing more on trying to finish my education. And because my mama kept asking me, when are you going to go back to college to get your doctorate? And I finally did a year before she passed in 1995. And so I'm so glad that I did that. But it took me 13 years. And by that time, I had a granddaughter who kept asking me, Grandmama, when are you going to finish? Because she was tired of seeing me writing all the time. And so, that was from one generation to the next. And here I am, the sandwich generation. So it's my responsibility to help to take what my parents did with civil rights, to bring it together with my grandchildren and what's going on in their worlds with what my understanding is. We're the last generation of students who went to all Black schools in a segregated world. We had to be twice as good as. We were taught that. So that's why when I went to the white school, the predominantly white school, I went in as number 25, but I graduated as number 15. And so I was prepared because of the teachers that we had. But one thing that I decided to do last year too was greeting cards. And I do greeting cards all the time for my family. Every year I do a special thing according to what we did that year, and I send it to everybody. But last year, because we couldn't be with our families because of the restrictions, I decided to create some cards. The first one is joy. And this is, may you continue to believe in joy to the world and peace. Because my cards and things are really trying to work towards healing. And so there are Bible verses in here related to joy and related to peace. Another card that I have is Kwanzaa, the 7 principles. Years ago, we went through Kwanzaa with our children with the candles and everything, the candle, the kinara, everything. I'm glad it's coming back because we still need that. Our children need that. But it's not just a holiday for 7 or 8 days. What it is that it's a way of living. That should be a year-long kind of a thing where we're dealing with all of these things. And so the Kwanzaa card deals with, the different Kwanzaa principles. And then another card that I did, because I am concerned about everybody, and I don't like to leave people out. So I did an inclusive card. And this inclusive card is, no matter how you and your family celebrate the winter holidays, may this be an opportunity for renewal and peace as we head into a new year of healing. And so this right here, it deals with peace. It deals with a lot of information. I think that's going to be good for us. But one statement in here I think is very important. We are in a moment of radical possibility. The world we have is fracturing. The world we want is coming into focus. Shocks like the ones we've experienced lead to realignments. Now it's up to all of us to build on this momentum. This is from the yesmagazine.org, the winter 2021. It's time for a change. And so my thing is to help you to empower yourself so you can go towards change.
Well, now, as you share that, and as we talk about parenting, as we talk about education, as we talk about the scope of life and how it juxtaposes.
Yes, it
When you are
does.
working with families, do you find it, and I ask this partly for this is a selfish question, because I ask it partly for myself, and I think my audience will feel us as well. But do you find parents being somewhat apprehensive, not because of you, the person, but because they maybe are not prepared, or they don't want to put in the work that it's going to take to see these things come to fruition, and these
Yes.
things being education, these things being life, these things being transitory through a hierarchy of personal and professional growth.
Right, right. When we're looking at people, we need to look at the fact that people like comfort. We like things that are familiar. Whether those things gave us the results we wanted or not, we like comfort and familiarity. But we need to look at the fact that we are now in the 21st century. Times have changed. The 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic are not good enough to really function in society. You know, that's one thing that testing did. It helped us to see what being proficient was. You know, you cannot just do a little bit and get by. You have to know what you're doing. When you're looking at 21st century skills, communication across cultures is very important. Courage is very important, because to break out of that shell of doing things a little different, and I recommend to some parents, you know, sometimes you have to really look at where you want to go. You have to look at who you're around all the time. Are they helping you to grow? Are they keeping you back? Are they keeping you from growing? And so I ask a lot of questions, and I look at people as, you know, I'm talking, because I like them to see and to start thinking about what's happening in their lives for real. And one thing that I always say, and I have it in the front of all my books, if you're playing a fire, get help. You know, don't try to go through this book unless you're doing what you need to do to protect yourself and your children. And so it's not just a thing of being against people, but it's really helping us to see that sometimes friends that we had, we've outgrown them. And sometimes the choices that we make are more related to what we can buy rather than who we are as human beings. And so,
Will you repeat that again, please? Listen, will you please repeat that again? I mean, my audience, I see the claps and the thumbs going up. Will you repeat that again?
okay, if I can do it the same way, let's see.
It doesn't have to be the same way. I mean,
Okay, very good.
just the thought behind that statement.
Mhm. You know, some of us are really caught up into buying the capitalistic system. And in my book, I really deal with that, because we need to understand that to buy, and buy, it depletes what we have. Our financial security is not secure enough anyway. And if we do too much buying, then why? You know, if you have 10 pairs of shoes, why do you need 25 or 40? And we really have to look at that, and we have to look at, what are we teaching our children? Is it more important to dress a certain way, or is it more important to have something in your brain? And so we have to realistically look at that. And, you know, it gets touchy, because some of us have built our lives around what we can buy. We built our lives on making sure that we wear labels. And see, when I was growing up, we didn't have labels because we didn't have money. My mother used to remake, she was a seamstress, and so she could remake my aunt's clothing for us. And I was so proud of my dresses, you know, that my aunts had made, you know, that they had worn. But when it came to my children, we purposefully never bought name brands, because we didn't want to advertise for somebody that we were not being paid to advertise for. And so that was a frame of reference that we had. And also, we didn't have a lot of money. You know, we were students in college for a lot of years. I think I was a professional student. But, you know, we used to get used clothing. And to us, it was new, you know, and so you bring it home, you wash it, you make sure it's good quality, and your children are okay. And some of us have forgotten that we don't have to get the best of everything. And when we say we want the best of everything, we need to look at our whole life and not just clothing. What are you feeding your children? What are you doing so that your home life is where it needs to be for peace? You know, we got a lot of stuff that we're working through. Some of us haven't healed from slavery. We have some of the same attitudes, some of the same things that are happening for generation after generation, because we are sort of scared sometimes to make a change. But we're in the 21st century, as I said. We cannot hold on to those things that used to help us, when a lot of times we didn't know the whole story behind it. You know, because all of us have heard about the lady who used to always make a ham a certain way. And so she had to cut it off and make sure, you know, because her mama did that. And so later on, she asked her mama, well, why did you do that? You know, I forgot to do it. Why did you do it? She said, because that was the size of the pan that I had. So sometimes we don't know the whole story, and we
Well, Dr.
need to be
Mapp,
aware. Uh-huh.
Dr. Mapp, as you make that statement, paradoxically, do you find that that's where, and you know, and I'm looking at listening to what you're sharing about your books and the information that you are imparting, and that's why I ask paradoxically, because it seems as though we, and dare I say especially the disenfranchised,
Yes.
seem to have a convoluted thought of what getting an education really is,
Yes.
because of all of the things that you've just shared, wearing someone else's name,
Hmm.
being very disingenuous, and even though you didn't say this word, but making fun of those individuals that are
Hmm.
not wearing someone
Yeah.
else's name,
Yes.
even into the so-called, and I do say so-called hip hop
Hmm.
generation,
Yeah.
where everything is baggy clothes, tattoos all over your body, talking about we just talking about our neighborhood and how we were reared, how we were brought up, and but nobody's talking about education.
Yeah.
But still, that's why I say it's a paradox. But still, we are claiming is that we are just educating the masses,
Yeah.
educating them to what? To a
Right.
bunch of foolishness.
Yeah.
Because, and you have already said it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm wearing somebody else's name, but I don't get paid for advertising. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm
Yeah.
I'm buying somebody else's derogatory, nonsensical music, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not serving a positive purpose.
Right. Right.
I'm listening to garbage. Even as I just had a domestic violence symposium in October 27th, and I renamed it the domestic terrorism and talked about people being
Whoa.
non-patriotic. It's
Yeah.
because you talk about
Mm-hmm.
patriotism. Oh, we flying the flag, we protecting our country. When you don't even protect your own house. So
Right.
how are you a
Right.
patriot when the
Mm-hmm.
people inside your own house is being
Yes.
beaten and beaten by you?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, they're being destroyed and they're being destroyed
Mm-hmm.
by you. But you'll
Mm-hmm.
run out and wave a flag and talk about you a patriot, and but you don't protect. So, and I say all of that. That's why I say we seem to have a large paradox of
Yes.
understanding when it comes to education, because
Mm-hmm.
we have adopted, the world seems to have adopted exactly what you're saying, is
Mm-hmm.
everything has to be some superficial, made
Yeah.
up hero worship type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to understanding life, as opposed to understanding what you're saying. And I don't keep want to repeat what you
Mm-hmm.
said. So when you address parents, when you address their children, and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed on one of your books you said, you know, sometimes it make people angry.
Yeah.
When you address those issues that make people angry, with
Mm-hmm.
you being the deep thinker that you are, what actually goes through your head at the time when you are simply presenting information that's going to promote personal growth within them,
Mm-hmm.
but in them that get angry, it have the opposite effect, because that's
Yeah.
why they get angry.
Right. Change is difficult,
Yes.
but change is the only thing that will lead us to a new state. When we're looking at, and I should have mentioned, when I look at families, I look at fathers and mothers. It takes two to make a baby. It takes two to raise or to rear children. And so Will Smith had a quote, and my books are filled with quotes. And some people say, well, I look at the quotes because the quotes really say a lot. But he talked about the fact that sometimes women keep our men from our children. And he said, even though we're imperfect, but nobody's perfect. So that's why we have to really look at where we are right now and what we're planning on growing into over time. So, this is all a part of the sauce whole thing, because we speak and act on the unspoken to challenge expectations. We expect certain things to happen with our children. We expect, one lady said to me one time, she said, well, I always thought that, you grow up, you go to college, you get a job, you eat a lot, you have a family, you get a diabetes, and you die. because in her family, they kept repeating that cycle. And so we have to look at our children deserve better. We need better. As we move towards the future, we need to do things a little differently. We need to make sure that love is where we are guiding our children. And we need to look at ourselves personally. You know, if I don't know how to love, I need to find out how. And so in my books, I list a lot of internet sites that people can go to that relate to what they may be going through. And I know sometimes people say, well, you know, you have a lot in these books, but life is a lot. And, you know, we can't, if you want to do better, you got to be better. One thing that Dr. Francis Welsing said a few years ago, and somebody sent it in a quote, and I should have printed it off, but her quote was, we are the only people who, and this is not directly correct, but we're the only people who take those demeaning things that were done to us and we wrap it up, pretty it up, and we become that. And we teach the world that this is what we are about. Our children are hurting because of that. We're allowing them to grow up too quickly. We are not doing what we need to do. And at some point, we have to stop the madness.
You know, Doc, might I say, wow, I'm happy that you're sharing that with our audience, because again, the thumbs are going up and the hand claps are going here. That's you know, right now, as you're saying, you know, even this whole process about the N word, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me, being a man of color, and I don't believe in colors, by the way. Being a man of color, is that how vehemently people fight, especially the young generation, to keep the N word and try to make all kind of excuses as to why it should be you. It's just, it blows me away. And you have just hit the nail on the head. We take the worst of it, put it in the package, try to put it all, pretty it all up, and then use it, because they are too weak to understand that they've been brainwashed. And many of them are brilliant. You know, the comedians and that type of thing, they're brilliant. But they can't process deep, and you use it earlier, they can't process deeply enough to understand why that's detrimental.
Right.
Yeah. But just saying, please continue, because I love your analogy about sauce. So please continue with that. And then,
when sauce is added to food, it's like a little extra flavor that we add to improve the taste. The sauce framework does the same thing. These are uncertain and fast-paced times. It's hard for us adults to look at what's going on, and our children are going through the same thing. And a lot of us are not protecting our children from all these adult things that are going on. And so our families need something extra. We need to have sauce put on us. We need to understand that we need to add sauce to change the flavor of our families, and so that we can shift for better results. You know, we need to disrupt some patterns that have been started. And if you're brave enough, you can think about that. But it takes courage. And a lot of people don't have courage. You're chicken, you're scared. And you don't think it that way. But really, you really are. You know, when you're looking at your children, do you want the same thing to happen to them that maybe happened to you when you were a child? Or do you want life to be better? You know, we are humans. And a lot of times we forget humanity. Humans need love and caring and relationships. And a lot of things that we do in our country, we don't build relationships. Even with our spouse, you know, we have to look at a lot of stuff. You know, when you're married for 21 years and you see changes that go on, and then you divorce and you still see changes that go on, we start understanding that we can all do better. And if you do better out of love, then those changes don't hurt so much. You know, it's adding a little sauce, something a little different, to try something a little different to see if we can change and challenge what we think is going to happen. You know, because we don't have to expect that everything's going to be bad for our children. When we expect that, of course it's going to be bad. We have to change how we think. And that's why in my books, Prepare Our Children for Their World, I'm going to just let you know what's in the table of contents. The first part of it, they're all in 3 parts. Preparing next generations, getting started with tough questions, relationships and learning, prepare for change, and hold family meetings. And then the next part is our families are up to us. Clues from birth through high school graduation. And there are clues for high school students too, because students in high school need to start looking at the fact that they are growing up. And as you know, from parents' point of view, you give children more responsibilities as they get older. And then you can trust them more. But if you're a parent who's a friend to your child and you don't really give them responsibility, they're not going to do good for the next generation because you haven't taught them the skills that they need. We say, I love my children. If you love them, prepare them for their families so things will be better. Okay, selecting quality schools is a part of it too, because a lot of us go through, trying to figure out what school that our children should go to. So this is very important. Another thing is talking to teachers. When you get that first call, your heart starts pattering out. What went on now? And so we really have to understand that there are some things that we can do that can make things better, or there are some things that we can do that can make things worse. So this is in this book to give you some step-by-step things on what you can try to see if it'll be better for your child and for you. The next part is history impacts the future. Gaps can hurt. And this is talking about educational gaps, things that happened in the past with you that you have to learn how to fill in so that you can do better. Adult choices. Adults make choices all the time. Some of us have the victim mentality. They made me do it. But whenever you're pointing your finger at them, 4 fingers are really pointing at you. 3 fingers are pointing at you. Empowering yourself, what you can do. Quality of life and learning, things that you can shift in your home so that your quality of life becomes better for you and your children. When adult children return home, and I put that in there because so many adult children are having to return home because of the times that we're in. For a while there, everybody was ready to be gone from home. But now sometimes because of economics, we have to go back home. But you have to do it a certain way so you have peace in your home. The next one, advocate for better schools. We have to advocate for better schools because our schools are not good enough. And then the last chapter is on thinking and feeling. Critical thinking is where we need to be right now. And I know that some people figure critical must be Marxist. Now, look, when you're looking at something that's important, that's critical. It has nothing to do with an economic system or a political system. We have to look at life critically. We have to understand that I can't just go on my feelings anymore. I got to think, and I have to learn how to think so I can make better decisions. So that's that book. The next book, How to Connect. The table of contents, what's needed to make sense? You got to plan. You have to have continuous learning with thinking. You have to have, and we have to look at literacy in a democracy because democracy is hurting right now. And that's our way of life. And, capitalism is that word we never hear about here. But, our capitalistic frame of reference keeps us in bondage in some ways. And so, people, they want to pit socialism against whatever, but we need to look at what are we really doing in this country? Do we have to have this throwaway mentality that's filling the oceans with all of this trash? Fish are now starting to have plastic in their bodies. So that means that when you eat a lot of fish, you eat a lot of plastic. But it's the same thing with anything else. That's why we need to really look at what we're eating today. And we need to look at the smells in our homes too. We think we can hide everything. Those chemical smells hurt our bodies. The personal becomes political. Looking at family stories, looking at US families from past to present. The personal impacts the political. People in a democracy, personal decisions, and humanity. Because the decisions that we make are not just for me and my family, but for humanity. Because the world is so small now because of the internet, we have to understand that what we say here in Kentucky is going to give some kind of result in other places if other people read it and believe what we say. And so we got to figure out how to tell truth too. Somebody came to my house one day and she said, but I don't know how you discern, what's truthful and what's not. But I said, that's why you have to read. You got to find some sources that are positive. And that's why I put a lot of sources in my books, so that you can look at something to start thinking a little differently. Don't just read the same things you read or listen to the same folk that you listen to or the same messages. You need to get outside your comfort zone and grow. And the last one, schooling and quality of life. Empowerment is the first step. Overcoming schooling gaps, what you can do, and then advocate for change. When you're looking at the thing of poverty in our country, we figure that the way we do it is the way it should be, but it's not. When you're looking at, I was going to be a social worker at one point until I realized that social workers should be working themselves out of a job. That's what a social worker is supposed to do. But we allow it to happen continually for year after year, decade after decade, generations after generations. We have to do better. We can't just depend on social welfare organizations. We need to figure out what is it that I can do within my power to make it better for my children. One thing that's very important too is loving me. This is one of my posters. In 2000, we had a group of women who came together and we looked at a lot of thoughts as to what can we do to really show our children, to show ourselves, to show the men or the women in our lives that we want to change, that we can do better. Loving me. It starts with self. If you don't love yourself, no matter what you try to dress up, how you try to dress it up, it's going to come out. We have to really understand that I got to care about me, but it can't be caring about you rather than taking care of your children. It's caring about you in addition so that you can take care of your children. Some parents, some women give until they die. Super women. I tried to be a superwoman for a while until I realized you can't be a superwoman. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to stay at home to take care of your children rather than being out there volunteering somewhere. So we have to have a good balance in that, because I volunteered for decades, in the community in Lexington where my children grew up. But it was a thing of where, it was within limits. And I made sure it was within limits because it was a small town. I live 15 minutes away from the school. My children live 10 minutes away from my home. So, it was different then. But it's different now because things are it takes so much time to travel. And we really need to look at that. But these are sisterhood reflections right here. Something else I found that was very important to be or not to be capable in today's world. There are so many things we need to do with our children so they become capable. But sometimes we want to protect them. Well, my mama, I said I wasn't going to do it with my children. But see, we had to look at how strong you are because of what your mama did. And that goes to faith too. Everything that I do, I put in a kernel of faith because we have to understand we're not here by ourselves. I know there are people are agnostics, people are doing this, people are doing that. But when you're looking in the scheme of things, nature, life, the earth that gives us life, it's not something that came out of a capsule. It was created by the Creator for the purpose of really worshiping. And so we really have to look at where we are right now and what we're doing. And then one thing I forgot to mention, that when it comes to those multiplication tables, the facts and things, I put them onto a poster. So if you have a homeschool, you can have some of these posters in your homeschool, and they're not too big, so you can do that. Clues to easier reading. This is really good. A lot of research went into this because we really have to look at, am I really understanding what I read? Some people today feel, I don't like to read, but you don't understand. Whenever you're picking up that phone, you're reading in essence, but you have to have an attitude about it to understand. If I don't understand, I need to carry my dictionary with me. When I was in college, we had a friend who he didn't know much academically, but he carried his dictionary with him. And the last I heard, he graduated years later with a doctorate because he learned from where he came from. He knew he didn't know. So he had the dictionary. Let me look up that word. There's Dion getting the word again. And, so we have to do what we have to do to get to where we need to go.
Well, Dr. DeBora LT Mapp, it's certainly been great having you here. We certainly appreciate you sharing sauce with us and all of the wonderful ideas. And you are just a treasure trove of information. And you certainly are a refreshing voice because I mean, just listening to you speak about life and the processes of life and the academics and how we intertwine these things together. People like to use that word because it's popular on the commercials about being priceless, but it truly is priceless to be able to sit and to share with a person such as Dr. DeBora LT Mapp. You have certainly been great. Listen, do us a favor, please. Please let us know how we might be able to get some of those products that you're talking about.
Okay. Yes. You can go to my website, schoolingsolutions.com. And so you can order directly from there. You can also PayPal me, Dr. Mapp. And so I may be wrong with that, but I'll send you the information so that, Ms. Laura, so that you can put the information out there. But also, I'm advertising with the Black Family magazine this year. And so they're going to do a special. And so anybody who goes through the Black Family magazine, you can get a 25% deduction on anything that you buy.
So please allow me and the Nobody Asked Me Guy show to again express our gratitude to you and for you for coming on and being diligent enough to share with us all of these fantastic and exciting pieces of information that you brought to the table. So again, we want to thank you and we appreciate you. We want you to go and have a great weekend. Let me wish you and our listening audience a happy Thanksgiving. And we just pray that all is going well. And we look forward to working with you again.
Thank you. Be safe and well, everybody.